Texas lawmakers who leave the state and break quorum can now face an added penalty. As KLTV7's Michael Richardson reports, House Bill 18 was sparked by this year's redistricting debate when Texas Democrats fled the state to block a vote.
150 members were elected to do the people's business, and they need to show up for work.
Republican Representative Cole Hefner is one of House Bill 18's co-authors. The law went into effect earlier this month, making it so state lawmakers who receive or spend money over a certain amount during the time that they are breaking quorum could face up to a $5,000 fine per violation.
My voters don't get to suffer out here just because somebody threw a temper tantrum and didn't like the bill that we were voting on. It's not a partisan deal. It's straight down the middle. So the rules apply to everybody.
The bill comes after Democratic lawmakers left Texas for 2 weeks during the special session to prevent a vote on a redistricting bill.
It is understandable that those who were against the bill would take every means necessary to elevate the issue for voters.
Democratic Representative Mihaela Plisa is among those who fled the state earlier this year. She says House Bill 18 limits dissent and could reduce the number of quorum breaks down the line.
That's really a shame for both parties. Both parties have used quorum breaking as a tool to have their districts' voices heard.
Earlier this year, lawmakers changed House rules to create additional fines and the possibility of losing seniority for members who purposely leave to deny a vote. Michael Richardson, KLTV7 News.
And looking ahead, Texas lawmakers will not collectively return to Austin until 2027 for the next legislative session.